business to fill the void with the business models that differ from the existing ones. The journey of a product starts from an idea. Having a good team, technical knowledge are not the only required things for the success of a product. Many ideas that are impressive miserably fail with time due to various factors. Proper marketing strategies, finance management, leadership are also the key factors of entrepreneurship. Competing in the zone of already established products, making the products stand out from the other ones, reaching the needs and expectations of people, adapting with time, and many more challenges stand in the path of an entrepreneur. So, the journey of entrepreneur is never a quick walk. The ideas are always taken up with the risks of profit. We have come up with a series of on dauntless enterprising and to learn from experts. Last week, we had Dauntless Enterprising 1.0, where three eminent speakers spoke on various aspects of entrepreneurship. We did learn many things and are now excited to learn further. So, we are back again with Dauntless Enterprising 2.0 to talk on entrepreneurship and the cosmic tale of branding. Branding today has become an important aspect in all kinds of business, regardless of their size, being large or small. It provides a major edge in increasingly competitive market. It speaks about your product, create trust among consumers, and also builds the financial value. Today, Sri Asha Sampath is here to speak on entrepreneurship and branding. We are pleased to have you here, ma'am. A hearty welcome to you. We are also joined by Dr. Premlata, Faculty Advisor, E&I Cell, School of Humanities and Management, NIT Andhra Pradesh. A cordial welcome to you, ma'am. A heartwarming welcome to all attendees for spending your valuable time over here and gracing the occasion. A hearty welcome to all the E&I Cell members for making this event happen. Before getting started, I request Mr. Shiva to present the summary of past events of E&I Cell. Mr. Shiva, please.
The Entrepreneurship and Innovation Cell of NIT Andhra Pradesh is a student-run initiative that nurtures talent, provides opportunities, and helps the students who have an inclination to an entrepreneurship as a career. Our main objective is to encourage budding student entrepreneurs by building confidence through activities and nurturing their skills by conducting workshops and events. I request Ms. Lahari to present a short video showing the events organized by our cell. The Entrepreneurship and Innovation Cell of NIT Andhra Pradesh is a student-run initiative that nurtures talent, provides opportunities, and helps students who have an inclination to entrepreneurship as a career. Our main objective is to encourage budding student entrepreneurs by building confidence through activities and nurturing their skills by conducting workshops and events. I request Ms. Lahari to present a short video showing the events organized by our cell. I request Ms. Punya to continue with the event.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shiva. So, without further delay, let's get started. Ms. Lahari, can we have the AV, please? So, today we have Shri Asha Sampath to speak on entrepreneurship and branding. She is the founder and head of growth and brand strategy practice at Brand Horizon, providing complete branding solutions for SMEs and startups. She is the independent director at Shraddha Infrastructure Projects of the Raisoni Group. She is also the co-producer of the Bespoke Show, a media platform that has seen about 40 editions. The platform is in function since November 2018 and has already completed 40 editions. This is span of 2 years. This is truly remarkable. She is the independent director and chairman audit committee and CSR committee member at Toyota Financial Services India. She is also the advisory council member at EFI. She is the managing director of India operations of Endeka Ceramics Limited. She has been guest speaker in many B schools. She was also jury member for Startup Context XMES IIMB 2018. She has over 25 years of rich experience in senior management and board roles in diverse sectors across Indian and international cultures. She was nominated for an International Management Development Program in the UK for potential general managers identified by a European MNC, where she had a fulfilling growth trajectory as she moved from finance roles to general management and then onto board roles. She was also part of the Asia management team and a core team member in 3 startups, 2 in India and 1 in Indonesia. In her role as managing director, she has responsibility for operations and P&L for the Indian SBU that had 2 manufacturing plants in India. This is truly impressive, ma'am. Your guidance, leadership has benefited many and will continue to do so. We are eagerly looking forward to be benefited maximum from this session. The stage is all yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much to the entire team of E&I cell of NIT Andhra Pradesh. It's really my privilege to be here and talking to all of you. First of all, thank you for a very warm welcome. The AV was a pleasant surprise. Normally what happens is we get lost in our daily chores and we never stop to look back how far we have come. Today you gave me an opportunity to recall my journey, so thank you so much. I'm really touched. I'd also like to congratulate the E&I cell of NIT Andhra Pradesh for such a great initiative on entrepreneurship, because the topic is so relevant today and so well aligned with the Government of India's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. So congratulations on that. And coming to the topic, dauntless on enterprising is a very creative topic, because the series, the name of the series has been so well conceptualized. Entrepreneurship is indeed daunting, and it takes a long haul of grit and resilience just to hang on there, forget being successful. So I think it's a great caption. And coming to the topic that I have been given today to talk about, it's entrepreneurship and the cosmic space of branding. This topic is equally interesting because the two are not independent of each other actually. They both coexist, and in fact, they're intertwined. Except probably in the case of, let's say, a company like Tesla, where Elon Musk chose to create a problem and then solve it. And so he's able to continue his marketing with zero costs. So not all entrepreneurs can have that vision and luxury. So in today's session, I would like to be talking for the next 40 minutes or so on a common entrepreneur's journey and what it takes to be an entrepreneur and make some steps forward. Obviously, I'm not talking about a unicorn or a multi-billion-dollar entrepreneurial journey. I'm just talking about how small startups can, small baby steps can be laid by budding entrepreneurs to their entrepreneurial journey. So at the end of this session, I'll be happy to take any questions. So I will start screening my share now. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Great.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Minimize that please minimize that pop-up, ma'am. Dauntless Enterprising pop-up. The one on your screen, right side bottom, ma'am. Yes.
Done?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I was mentioning earlier, entrepreneurship and the cosmic space of branding, are the two independent? No, they are not. Is one of them an option? No, they are not. Who can be an entrepreneur? Well, anyone can be an entrepreneur. As they say, entrepreneurs are not born, they are made. That said, I think there are some skill sets and personality traits that would define the success of an entrepreneur. And when we talk of skill sets, I would look at three categories of skill sets that a budding entrepreneur would probably want to seek to acquire, because these are not latent when we are. It's something that can be acquired as we go forward in our journey. First is the cognitive skills. So when we talk of cognitive skills, obviously an entrepreneur needs a creative mind, an innovative mindset, an ability to problem solve, an ability to take decisions. Of course, today, data science and artificial intelligence has given us loads of scope to make decision-making easier, but still, I think the inherent capabilities that we can inculcate would help us better through our journey as an entrepreneur. Besides cognitive skills, I think there are also a lot of business skills that one needs to stay conscious of if one wants to become an entrepreneur. Because a person may be an expert in technology, but at the same time, an entrepreneur's life revolves around various diverse functions. So for example, if he has to do a problem-solving function, he will need data. So today, data is available in abundance, both through natural intelligence and artificial intelligence, right? So he would probably need some kind of knowledge on how technology can be leveraged to help him in decision-making process. He could also be looking at design thinking. He or she could be looking at developing an innovator's mindset. So all of these skill sets would help an entrepreneur function better during his while he chases his dreams as an entrepreneur. Besides these two skills, what is also very relevant for a budding entrepreneur would be soft skills. And the reason I say soft skills is every entrepreneur would also be a manager at some point, and he would want to go beyond as a leader. Why? Because he'll have to manage a team. He will have to lead by example. He will have to communicate with them to make sure that he gets the best out of them. He will have to motivate them. So I think interpersonal skills, empathy, communication skills, team player skills, all of these skills would go a long way in being successful as an entrepreneur. So I think these are the basic skill sets that would qualify to be an entrepreneur, but it's not necessary that everybody has all of these at any point of time. I think it's just a question of identifying the gaps and making sure that we try to overcome those gaps, because today I think there are a lot of courses available, both offline and online, and there are some really good coaches who can help us develop these skills. So I think it's just necessary that we are conscious of what skills are required to pursue an entrepreneurial journey. Besides the skill sets, there are also some personality traits that I think one needs to develop to make sure that they don't lose the game halfway through when they set out on an entrepreneurial journey. And to find out what are the traits that are needed, you can probably ask some of these questions that I have listed out here. Do you feel uncomfortable in a comfort zone? If the answer is yes, then I think entrepreneurship is a good space to be in. Because entrepreneurship is not a trade-off for a comfortable job, nor is it a trade-off if you're not successful in a job. If you're able to enjoy unpredictability and a VUCA world, then I think entrepreneurship is something that you're going to attract. That's point number one. And point number two, entrepreneurship, just like several other courses, but probably more here, is a continual learning curve, because we start out on some idea during our journey, and it's not necessary that we also earn billions of dollars through our entrepreneurship through the very first idea that we started. The idea keeps evolving over time. We learn through various external factors. We learn through customers. We learn through the market dynamics, the competitor dynamics. So I think it's a very continual learning process. So I think one of the personality traits that are very necessary for an entrepreneur is to be a student forever. Point number three, are you faint-hearted? If so, then you're in the wrong place. Because in an entrepreneurial journey, what's a non-negotiable fact is that we will run into multiple roadblocks. We will have many doors slammed on our faces, but I think we should not lose heart. We have to be very resilient, and we need to have the determination to stay on. And I call this the iceberg principle, because if we look at several successful entrepreneurs today, they would have spent years building up their ventures. Loads of hard work would have gone into it. They would have had multiple stretch of frustrations and disappointments. Of course, they would have also had success stories along the way that would have kept them motivated. But besides that, I think there's some kind of a passion and a hunger to build something that would have kept them going. So just like an iceberg, there's a lot of hard work that would have gone into those ventures, and then what people will see will only be the rosy picture on top. So there are many people who look at other successful entrepreneurs and then say, oh, she's doing so well as an entrepreneur, so maybe I should also give up my job and take up entrepreneurship. But I think that's going to be a very wrong approach, because that's underestimating the hard work that goes into it. And so I think it's very important to underestimate the success and overestimate the failure so that you're prepared for it mentally. And if things go well, great. If things don't go well, I think you're prepared for it and you know how to handle it. And the fourth personality trait I would think is very necessary for an entrepreneurship is to be a jack of all trades. Because as an entrepreneur, it's not like working in an organization. In an organization, you have a system in place, you have a team in place, and you have so much of the ecosystem that helps you at every point of time. So you have an expert, you have a matrix organization. All of these are going to help you. So even if you are, let's say, 70 to 75% good in your own domain in an organization, well established, you can still sail through and probably even do well. But not so in an entrepreneurship, because I think at some point of time you will have to wear multiple hats. So a person who can wear multiple hats is probably relatively more prepared for meeting various demands of an entrepreneurial journey. And if a budding entrepreneur is an expert in one field, I think he or she would do well to have co-founders in complementing skills in order to make sure that they complement each other for all the demands of an organization, so to say. And the last point I would cover as a personality trait is, do you have a fear of failure? If you have that, I think it's best you overcome that before you start off on a journey to entrepreneurship. When we talk of failure, it could be financial failure. There are ways to deal with it, because some people enter entrepreneurial journey at a very young age. Probably they'll have the comfort of a parental income that can support them, or they can enter a journey in the middle age when they would have some savings from their jobs that will help them. Or they could be entering entrepreneurship probably later part of their lives, let's say 45 or 50, by which time they may have some savings that can support them with the daily needs while they pursue their entrepreneurial dreams. There will evidently be a fear of financial failure. So I think the way to go about it is, each one is a different case, and I think everyone will have a different way of managing the situation. But one thing that people probably can look at is to bootstrap. So if you are bootstrapping, what happens is you try and maximize on what resources you have, and then you also try to build the venture incrementally and stay nimble, so that you don't go overboard on scaling disproportionately and then realize that you're in a stage when you're not able to meet the daily demands of your income, and then you're left with no choice but to give up on your dreams. So I think it's important to plan out the finances fairly well before you set out on your entrepreneurial journey, so that even if it takes, let's say, 18 months to 12 months to start to earn a fair level of income or revenue streams, you're still comfortable to pursue it. Besides the financial failure, I think there's also an element of social cost of failure that's attributed to entrepreneurship. And when we talk of social cost of failure, it's what society will say if we fail. I think that's something that no one can help you with. A budding entrepreneur has to overcome that fear by himself. He will have to have the belief that he will be able to pursue, and he will also have the conviction that he's having a good idea. And more importantly, I think he should be more concerned about chasing his dream rather than what others say about his success or his failure. Of course, there is also a lot of social factors attached when people pursue entrepreneurship at a very young age, because when there's no income, it could help in, it could affect various other aspects when it comes to marital matters and things like that. So those are areas that someone would need to think about a little bit before they actually pursue it. Because at the end, if they have the courage of conviction, I think there'll be no stopping them from pursuing their dreams. So these is broadly, I would think, the personality traits and skills that one can kind of try to inculcate before setting out on this entrepreneurship journey. Moving forward, As I mentioned earlier, I would like to cover some aspects of entrepreneurship in a very simple way. And I'm not talking about building unicorns and billion-dollar businesses. I'm only the very initial steps that practically one needs to go through or will go through to be able to make the first mile. And I have been both an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur, fortunately. When I say intrapreneur, I've handled 3 startup projects when I was in a job. And that gave me a very good insight of what entrepreneurship is all about. So when I actually entered entrepreneurship, I did not have many surprises. And more recently, I also had the privilege of going through the entrepreneurship course at IIM Bangalore, a brief one. And that only made me validate a lot of the things that I had done. And it also gave me a chance to introspect on a couple of things that I could have done differently. So I hope that this slide will help budding entrepreneurs to get a fair view of what are the steps we normally follow in entrepreneurship. First of all, it's the ideation stage. Obviously, is the very first stage in entrepreneurship. Some people may already have an idea of what you want to do as an entrepreneur. Some may not have an idea, but just want to be an entrepreneur. Some may have forced circumstances that would make them an entrepreneur, but some may pursue entrepreneurship as a passion. So it doesn't matter. All the 4 are okay. But what's important is to articulate on the idea before you take any other step. Why? Because as an entrepreneur, obviously you need a customer, right? And if you need a customer, you need to have a product or a service that will add value to the customer. If it doesn't, he will not pay you for it. So if he doesn't pay, there is no revenue stream. So there's no question of entrepreneurship. So I think the first and foremost important thing is to ideate. How can one ideate a value-added idea or a workable idea? I think the way to look at it is, is there a problem that we can solve? Is there a pain point that we can address? If so, how do we identify that problem? How do we identify that pain point? So what one can do is just explore the environment. When I say environment, there are a lot of things, just the environment around us, either at home or at work or in a community. It could be the economic environment that's giving us ideas. It could be the demographic environment that's giving us ideas. So I think we just need to observe and explore, is there something that I can solve that will make an impact? And if we can identify that problem, I think we have made a step forward. When we identify the problem, I think it's also important to identify the solution along with it. And then we have to go a step further to see if the problem and the solution fit. How do we make sure whether the problem and the solution fit? It's not easy because we start off on an idea, but somewhere along the line, we may realize that it's a great idea, but maybe no one wants it. And then we won't go too far, right? So I think it's important also to articulate as the next step, why are we doing this? What is it exactly that we will do? So why are we doing this is because there is a problem. What is it that we will do is because that's what we think is the solution to the problem. But having done both of this, somebody has to want that solution. So is there somebody that we can actually sell that solution to? And if so, who is it? And the next question comes, are they willing to pay for it? Because we may have a great idea, and they may also want the product, but they may not be willing to pay for it. So I think the combination is there is a problem or a pain point, and our solution is the right solution for it, and there is a target customer who like the idea and who also like to pay for it. So I think all of this should sync before we move on to the next phase. How do we make sure that the customer is ready to pay for it? First of all, I think there's an internal analysis that we need to do before we reach out to a potential customer. And what's that internal analysis? The internal analysis is, you can ask ourselves, are we in a white space? When I say white space, is there something that's unique about our product? It could be something about the product or the service itself. It could be something unique about the way we market it. It could be something unique about the customer experience. So it's not necessarily the product itself has to be unique, because it's not easy. Over the decades, a lot of people have innovated and invented so many products. So today, to find out something that's really unique is not an easy task. But it could be unique in various aspects along a value chain. Like I said, it could be unique in terms of market reach. It could be in terms of go-to-market. It could be unique in terms of a customer experience. So it could be unique in multiple ways. But the most important thing is there has to be a value proposition that's different from what the customer is not already enjoying it. And I'll give a live example for this, like a case study later on during this session. But for now, I think it's important to identify that unique point in the product or service that we are planning to offer. Having identified this, what we need to do next is an hypothesis testing of our ideas. How do we go about it? Today, thanks to internet, I think it's never a problem to reach out. So what we have to do is to reach out to people who we think are our potential customers. So it's not a good thing to be asking our friends and relatives and family members, because they're not, unless they are the users of our potential users of our product, because more often than not, I think the well-wishers will probably be more wary of our getting into entrepreneurship. So you can't expect a very great support when you venture out on something that's not proven as yet. So I think the best people to go to test our hypothesis are potential customers of our products. So I think it's important to identify, which we would have already done in point 2, for whom. And those are the people that we need to reach out to understand whether our product will have a use for them, A, and B, would they be willing to pay for it? Now, how do we do this? Very easy. We can draft out a set of questions explaining what we intend to do and why we intend to do, how we intend to do, and how it's going to solve a problem for them. So obviously, you're not going to go and ask them very obviously, this is the price, or you're going to pay for it. No, that's not going to work. So I think what we have to do is to set out on introducing our product to them. And we can do this in 2 ways. One is obviously in the current situation, if somebody wants to do it, a face-to-face interaction may not be greatly successful because of all the social distancing. So this is something that we can do through Google Forms. Draft a very well-worded and articulate questionnaire. Send it to, let's say, 25 to 30 prospective customers, and try and get a feedback from them on whether they like the product. So depending on the feedback that we get, we can go to the next step. And that next step, I think, has to be a face-to-face interaction where we take either the prototype, or if it's a service, go and introduce the service to them and then tell them that we are ready with this, because at this point of time, you don't have huge finances to make a product. So obviously it's going to be a prototype, and you would want paying customers to be ready for you by the time you start spending money, right? So I think the prototype is a great idea to set out on the first initial steps. So we can take that to the customer and then validate the idea with the customer. And obviously there's a very diplomatic and effective way of asking them, if we were to introduce this product, would you be interested to buy it? And most customers are nice and they'll say, yes, yes, we can. And obviously the next step is a challenge, because you don't know whether they want to pay for it. If they want to pay, if they're willing to pay for it, how much are they willing to pay for it? And if they're willing to pay for it, would it cover your costs? So I think it goes through a series of interactions with the customers before we can actually validate our idea. So having validated the idea, let's assume that we interact with about 25 to 30 customers, or probably even more, depending on the case-to-case basis. Let's assume that 50% of the customers are ready to pay for it. Then the next step is to come back to the drawing board, and then there could be some customers who would have told you, no, if the product were like this, maybe we'll be interested. But in the current form, it's not going to solve a problem for us. So you come back with lots of feedback from the customers. Some may be encouraging, some may be discouraging, and some may be quite cold and passive, so that may not be very useful for us. But we will take the positive and the negative feedback, work on it. And then I think the next step that we will need to work on is what they call as a lean canvas in entrepreneurial terms. Now, what is lean canvas? I think it's a very common term. It's available extensively on the internet. The formats are also available, so all of you can just go and Google. But basically, a lean canvas will cover almost all the steps that you have gone through so far, which is your idea, the why, what, and for whom, the value proposition, and the hypothesis testing that we have done. Besides that, it will also cover the financial viability, the details of the founders, and the risk analysis, and the distribution model and the chain. So basically, you'll capture all your thought process that you have gone through over, let's say, 2 to 3 months, to bring your idea to a stage when you think that you're ready to start on your business model. Once you have done that, why we do this lean canvas is we are helping ourselves articulate the entire gamut of our venture in just one sheet of paper, and then that's going to help us transition from a business idea into a business model, because it's going to capture everything that's necessary for us to start pricing on our model. You would have captured all the costs. You would have spoken to your ecosystem players in the distribution chain. You would have spoken to potential customers. You would have taken some ballpark numbers on what kind of resources you need, and worked out on probably your rental costs, whatever it needs for you to start off in a very small way. And then that will help us to work out a pricing for the product or the service that we plan to launch. So the process of effectuation, as they call, is the process when we transform business ideas into a business model. Having done that, the next step obviously is to think of the go-to-market strategy. And when we talk of go-to-market strategy, it's working out on a very creative pitch to reach out to the customer, and also the distribution channels that we need to work out in order to make sure that we start launching the product. And of course, The last step will be the funding, and I think it takes time before we can get there, because no investor would actually fund an idea. He would fund ventures that have revenue streams. So I think our very first task before we can even think of funding will be to build a sales pipeline and try to get few customers upfront. And then when we have a revenue model and we are able to showcase a valuation based on, let's say, 3 months sales or 6 months sales, then depending on that valuation, we could identify investors as angel investors or pre-seed investors, seed investors, Series A, Series B, and so on. So for a very early stage startup, I think bootstrapping is most important. Besides bootstrapping, the other sources of funding that one can look for will be family and friends, and probably one step forward will be crowdfunding. So these are the broad steps that one can expect when you want to be an entrepreneur. So the topic is talking about entrepreneurship and the cosmic space of branding. And as I mentioned earlier, the two are very closely intertwined, and branding is never an option in an entrepreneurial journey. Let me tell you why. If we want to start a venture, the venture also needs an identity, like we all have an identity. We all have our identity on Facebook, we have our identity on LinkedIn, we have our identity on Twitter, Instagram, all over. But we also need to give an identity to our venture, right? So that's where I think branding comes into place. So when I talk of branding, I'm not just referring to a name, a logo, a tagline. Branding goes far beyond, far deeper, I would say. I think branding is all about answering those questions that I mentioned earlier about why we are here, what's the purpose we are here, and why are we here, and what's the impact that we intend to make. Because unless we are going to make an impact, sustainability becomes a challenge. So I think those questions that we already have answers for will reflect in our brand identity as a vision and mission, which will obviously be reflected in all our brand identity collaterals, which are, it could be our website, logo, marketing collaterals, anything that we want to do with regard to the brand identity. So I think the branding exercise actually starts off at a very early stage of a venture, not when we have already started selling, because I think branding is the bedrock of any venture, because unless you have articulated all of these in a very clear way in terms of your purpose and your core values, you cannot send out the right message to your stakeholders. So I think the very first step is to have a very well thought out sense of purpose, core value, and our mission statement through our branding collaterals. Point number one. Point number two, branding also takes relevance because we have to position ourselves. I mean, we can't just say we are coming out with this product, we are coming out with this service. No, that won't work, because more often than not, you'll not be the pilot players in your venture. There will be other players who are already there in one form or the other. So I think it's important to understand where we want to position ourselves, which means which segment of customers we are going to address, because we cannot be available for everybody. We'll have to identify who will be the most likely buyers of our product. So for that to happen, I think it's important to position ourselves there. And only then I think we'll be able to deliver clear value to our customers. So again, here when we talk of this, we have to talk of what's the white space that we are creating so that people cannot replicate our product very easily, at least for a few years. So I think brand positioning assumes huge relevance. Point number 3, when we launch a venture, when we set up a venture and launch a product or service, I think it's also important that right from the word go, the customer starts to recognize us. And that's why we have our logo and the name. And we also have our collaterals, our website. But what's also important is we interact with the customers through various channels. We talk to them face to face. We talk to them on the phone. We communicate with them through emails. We communicate with them through the social media channels. So it's very important that we realize that every communication is building up on a brand recall, right? So if we have to build a brand recall quickly and with clarity, I think it's important that we stay consistent about several things across all the channels. So brand guidelines become a relevant part of our communication strategy in any new venture. Having done this, at the beginning, we have also set out on our vision, right? We have defined our purpose. We know what kind of impact we want to make. We have also defined our core values, and we want to communicate that to a customer. And that communication is what we call the brand promise. So customer will start to take us seriously when we communicate that brand promise through our communication channels. And once we communicate that brand promise, our next challenge is to live up to that promise, not just in the form of the product or the service, but also alongside the value chain in various forms. So there will be several touch points along the value chain. So it's important to make sure that the brand promise gets delivered across every stage of our association with the customer. And for that to happen, I think we have to track the customer experience journey very closely. So every interaction has to be tracked. Today we have a lot of AI tools to track it. We can track the consumer behavior, the customer experience, and then it's a feedback loop that we form. And every feedback becomes an input for us, and we keep going back to the drawing board, try to keep improving, and the innovation goes on. So it's like a PDCA cycle. We keep improving, and each improvement is a step towards sustainability of our brand. So here, this is where brand relevance comes into play. How does brand building add value? Well, it fosters a better connect with the customer needs because you are closely interacting with the customer. So you come to know what's good for him, what he's looking for, and the innovative mind starts working. How can we do better? Being close to the customer, we also learn what the competition is offering. So we are very conscious of trying to make ourselves different. And the most important thing is we also use the feedback of the value that the customer is getting to define the premium pricing. For example, if you are giving a 30%, the value proposition could be in various ways. It could be in productivity, it could be in pricing, it could be in quality. So it depends on what the product or service is, but depending on that, we could also derive at what premium we could charge, what premium pricing we can charge to make sure that it's at a level that the customers are ready to pay for it. Because if it's more than what the customers is ready to pay, obviously competition will take over. If it's very less, we are the losers. So I think it's necessary to arrive at the optimum premium pricing for our products. And 4, we also leverage on the brand when we have to target new markets and customers. If a brand is already built, it's so easier to get new customers for our products. And finally, I think it plays a huge role in building a robust relationship with all the stakeholders, be it government, be it investors, and of course the customers, because it's very important that we build credibility in the market and the ecosystem if we have to move forward. Otherwise, we'll become a fly-by-night operator. Now, I'll quickly cover two cases in this exercise on the power of brand, because theoretical knowledge is easy. It's available all over. I think it's the practical insights that can be more interesting. I was working with a European multinational, which was a 50-year-old brand, right? And I'll tell you how I enjoyed the power of the brand working with them for close to 2 decades. We were the market leaders for that product. I won't go into too many details due to paucity of time, but I'll tell you the essence. Because we were the market leaders, every month we had a revolving price, dynamic pricing that were being announced every month on month. So at the beginning of every month, all our competitors would wait for us to announce the price, because unless we announce the price, none of the customers were ready to buy the product from our competitors. Why? Because if we were to fix the price at 50, they would not want to pay a competitor 52, right? So they would rather wait for us to announce the pricing. So even if it is sometimes second or third, they would wait for us to announce the price, and only then the other competitors can fix the price. Only then the cycle starts. So many a times I was under attack from my competitors for delaying on the price announcement, and that was a nice situation to be in, being market leaders. Point number one. And point number two, when it comes to quality, again, because we were the market leaders, any new person who launched a similar product, that product would get benchmarked against our product. So you can imagine the power of the brand. Point number two, our organization went through several name changes over a span of 20 years, at least 5 or 6 name changes because of management changes. But every time the management changed, the power of the brand continued because we bought over the logo each time. And the resources that were managing the customers did not change. So the customers, every time we went to the customer, the reaction was so encouraging and gratifying. And they would say, how does it matter if the name changes? Because the people behind and the product quality is so consistent. So we don't care what the name in Europe is. At the end of the day, what matters is the product that we get here and the people we are talking to here. So don't worry about it. Your business will continue. It's going to be business as usual. So that was such an encouraging thing for us to face when you're a market leader. And the third thing is the new application development. So whenever, a product had become more like a Xerox or a Google. People say, right, Google it. They don't say check it on the internet. So they don't say photocopy. They say Xerox it. So just like us, our product had also become a generic name, which is in a way good, in a way bad. But the good side is that was the recognition or the recall our product had. So whenever we had to go for a new application, it was just a cakewalk for us. So what I'm trying to say is, if adequate attention to branding is given right from day one, I think the payoffs will be unimaginable. The next case study that I'll quickly cover, I think we are running out of time. I'm sorry, do we have the time for this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Leveraging on the brand, we actually converted a mid-size segment to a premium segment. We were trying to introduce a new product where there were already a dozen players ahead of us. And the customer was already in a comfortable zone buying from those 12 customers. So when we tried to launch the product, we went to the customer saying that we have introduced this product, but the response was really, really discouraging and cold. And then they said, no, we are already working with your competitors for the past 12 months, 12 years rather. So why would we want to change over at this point of time? What's unique about your product? Are you bringing in a game changer? Otherwise, don't even waste our time. So the questions were so discouraging, and they said the only question that we had to answer at that point of time is, what is it in me for me as a customer? And that's something that we could not quantify. So we were not ready for it. So it's a lesson that we learned the hard way, and I'm sharing it because it's so easy to learn from others' lessons rather than our own lessons, and it's less expensive too. So what we did was we went back to the drawing board as usual. We did a market research, and then we were flooded with pleasant surprises, because the same customers who we thought were in a comfort zone had huge problems with the same competitors. And the market research revealed that they were not happy with their service, they were not having consistency in their products, but they were not willing to reveal that to us only because A, they were in a comfort zone, and B, we did not pitch right for them in terms of the value add that we were able to give them. So what we did was, the market research went on for almost 6 months because it's a B2B product. And after having done the market research, we found the pain points and we completely revamped our brand and marketing strategy. And then we went back with a completely made over strategy. And believe me, the response was completely the opposite. And then they said, oh, this is great. This is very interesting. And the same customers who slammed the doors on us said, oh, we would like to hear more. So that's the way a branding actually can make a huge difference. And then they were ready to test out. Of course, there were other challenges on the cost because it's a B2B. There was switchover costs, there were lab trial costs, there was factory stoppage costs. So we had to work out a negotiation for the sharing of costs. But having done that, we finally made our entry into one customer. So he was one of those first customers who gave us the space to test out the products. And once we did that, it was only a matter of months before the word went viral that we are able to generate huge productivity and huge the savings in terms of cost and huge incremental value addition in terms of quality. And the customers were able to actually see it when they started exporting the products. So they started enjoying the brand equity. And believe me, it was so gratifying. The same customers who were cribbing for prices, they actually called us and said that we are able to get a huge pricing for our products, almost 30% more than what we were getting before from the export market. So I think it's time for you to increase your prices. So, what more do you want after 2 years of struggle to introduce a product to a customer in a way that the value proposition sustains? So I think this is something that's very relevant, so I wanted to share. So what's the horizon? Why branding? Branding is no longer an FMCG or a consumer durable topic. Rather, it's important also, in fact, equally and more importantly to industrial segments. Today, in an era of globalization and internet, everybody picks up 2 or 3 choice of suppliers well ahead of actually talking to them. So I think if we are not branding ourselves, I think we stand very little chance of even being shortlisted for their requirements. Improved information access and discerning customers. Again, because of the internet, I think the customers have a lot of information available to them on the web. So the one who brands effectively are the ones who get identified. And as I was mentioning in the case study number 2, a customer's own brand equity depends on the B2B brands that he partners with. So I think branding is not an option. My rule of three in entrepreneurship, just to come back to entrepreneurship because that's where we started, and branding is integral part of entrepreneurship. There are three things that I would say are very important, and I would like to call it the rule of three. Be wary of armchair advisors when you want to start a venture. Not being offensive, but I think it's important that you choose as advisors or mentors or co-founders who have actually been there once in some form or the other, because they know what it takes. They can be a sounding board, they can be a well-wisher, they can be an advisor. They probably will also have solutions, but more importantly, I think they will be a good way to offload your roadblocks, because they'll be able to take the grit. They have the grit and resilience to tell you that no, it's not that difficult. We can get there, and they'll walk the journey with you. But armchair advisors, it's probably good to listen to them, but I think the advices from the trenches are more valuable. Complementing skills will help when you choose your co-founder or your advisors on your entrepreneurial journey, because we need all kinds of skills to be able to run the venture successfully. Bootstrap and stay nimble. I think there's something that I covered earlier. It's better not to scale disproportionately, because once we do that, I think we have already lost the game before we begin. And I think that may not be the best thing to be doing. We would rather want to sustain on a longer term. Avoid co-founder arrangements without skin in the game. I think it's important that there are many startups that have failed because of not because they don't have adequate finances, because of co-founder arrangements not working out well, and that's because some people will be taken as co-founders just for either marketing or technical knowledge, and they will not be active partners in the venture. And then what happens is, at some point of time, when the venture doesn't look very encouraging, they'll just walk away. And then the person who has spent all the money into the venture would be left with lack of many of the critical skills that are necessary. And then going in search of another venture, maybe a lot of maybe time consuming and cost consuming, and then he may even want to give up. So ultimately the venture fails. So I think when we find a co-founder, it's important that we work out the co-founder arrangement in a very healthy way. I think mutual trust and respect is very important. And besides that, I think sharing of investments and workload are also very key to a sustainable co-founder arrangement. Summary of my experiences. Entrepreneurship is an experiential journey. It's not something that can be taught. It's something that can be learned though. And there are a lot of incubators and accelerators these days who can facilitate it. Entrepreneurship is sometimes a play, at times a battle, and at times a way of life. We all would like to choose it as a play, and that's best done. But let's not forget that there will be very frequent battles that we'll have to win. It's many times chaos, and we have to be ready for it. And many times nothing very great or very negative happens. It's just a way of life. And three, sustainability builds over time if we stay focused on value to the customer. And most importantly, we have to be hungry enough to build something out of nothing. That's my session. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
That was a great session, ma'am. I'm sure our audience has every can hear some noises. Can all of you please mute your guys? Okay. So that was a great session, ma'am. I hope many of our audience have a happy take from this talk. Ma'am, with
Thank
your
you.
permission, can we start our Q&A session?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, guys, we are open for questions. You can drop them in the chat box. Okay, we have first question. It's from Venkat. Ma'am, how can we consistently maintain a brand?
How can you consistently maintain a brand? Two things. One is be consistent in whatever you're doing in terms of what you have promised you will do at the beginning. That's one. And two, when it comes to a product or service, I think consistency in your quality, consistency in your quality of service, consistency in wanting to be innovative and value added to the customer. I think that helps. Small steps, but consistent steps.
Ma'am,
Okay,
I have a question. Ma'am, for
Shiva?
fewer.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, but you just forgot to stop sharing your screen, ma'am. People are able to
Yes.
see your. Yeah, we will
Voice is
just.
not very clear, but we can try. I'll let me mute and then switch on.
Ma'am, we just stop sharing the screen, ma'am, and then we will be able to hear your audio clearly. Sharing your screen.
Ma'am, I have a question. Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, kind of can try.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? Ma'am?
Yes. Yes, I'm unmuted.
Okay, ma'am, thank you.
Ma'am, I have a question. Like, we have for example, when you start a company,
Yes.
usually after a few years,
Yes.
some of the companies change their names, like from
Yes.
Hutch to Vodafone, for example.
Yes.
So,
Right.
so why do you think a particular brand works during a certain duration of time and then fades away after a few years? Like they had to change the name, right? Because
Right. The name would have changed because of the change in ownership, right?
okay, but
Right.
because
But yes, go ahead.
but I mean, like all the customers, they're used to a
Mhm.
particular, they're used to that particular brand.
Right.
So why suddenly change the name? Like
No,
would it?
the name change is inevitable, right? So it's part of acquisition terms. Sometimes what they do is, just to give you an example, when we were changing names, we actually had an arrangement with the new buyer that for about a year we will continue with both the names. We'll continue to use also the old name as erstwhile ABC. So the new name is XYZ. XYZ within brackets, erstwhile ABC. So sometimes you can actually negotiate that with the buyer to make sure that the brand transition happens over a period of time. But sometimes there will be strategic reasons when the buyer would not allow that. And in such cases, I think what happens is, rather, the seller would not allow that. So, in such cases, what happens is the buyer will have to chart out a very effective communication strategy with the existing customers to give them the trust and the confidence that the organization management has changed, but it has not made any difference to the core values, to the product offering, or to the value quality of services that they are going to offer. In
So
fact, those situations they have to stay more connected with the customer to make sure that they don't lose out on the customer.
so ma'am, you're saying that once a company builds a steady customer base, consumer base, so like the branding is not that important, but the product is what matters.
Product is what matters, the quality of service is what matters, the connect with the customer is what matters. The people in the front line also matters because the customers would have got used to interacting with them, so they would have developed a bonding with them. So the people in the front line have to continue during such transition to make sure that the transition is seamless. So many organizations make a grave mistake of changing the people in the front line, and that's when I think they lose out on the brand value that has been built up over the years. So I think resources are also play a very key role during the brand transition.
Ma'am, like a follow-up question on the same topic, but
Shiva, ma'am, sorry for interrupting, but we cannot hear your audio clearly, ma'am. Ma'am, can you just try reconnecting? Ma'am, we are unable to hear your audio properly.
there is a slight lag, ma'am, from your video.
Ma'am, the audio would be better if you switch off the video. So ma'am will be back within few minutes. Till then, keep posting your questions in the chat box. Kindly don't leave the meeting. Keep posting your questions. And we would like to know if you are interested in knowing any other topics on entrepreneurship. So if there are any suggestions so that you need the next webinar on any particular topic, so please post it in chat box. Yes, ma'am.
Why ma'am is not available?
Ma'am, ma'am's connectivity is quite low. Like we were unable to
Okay.
hear her audio properly. She will reconnect soon.
Okay, ma'am. Sure.
So till then,
Yeah, you can take the questions from the audience till that time. And have you floated the feedback form?
ma'am, just after the Q&A, we will float the feedback form.
Yeah, sure, sure. Okay.
So till we reconnect back to madam, please keep posting your questions in the chat box, and also the topics that you want to explore in the field of entrepreneurship, so that we can have a future sessions on that. So till madam connects back, we have some fun activities to do with you. So I guess you have, everybody is familiar with McDonald's and Domino's. So it makes your favorite food available in any part of the world. So in case you are given an opportunity to build any international restaurant chain, what would be the food that you would choose so that you get it to eat anywhere in the world? Just drop your answers in the chat box and let's see what might be the next upcoming worldwide restaurant change. Guys, please, this is just for fun. Till madam reconnects back, please share your opinion.
Okay, guys, we have some polls planned out for you. I'll drop the link in the chat box. Please do participate in those polls. I'll be sharing the results to you until ma'am rejoins.
Ma'am will be back soon. So till then, let's have fun.
I'm telling you, they're just for fun. You don't need to worry about them. Just open it. I'll start the poll. Okay, I hope my screen is visible to you all.
Yeah.
So we have around 5 for work and gain experience before starting a startup. Okay, that's fine. Not clear about future, that's okay. Become an entrepreneur and have a startup. Okay, just after graduation, that's fine. Come on, Poland. I think we have more than 7 participants in the meet. And I just got 7 votes. Come on, start voting. Okay, fine. So I'll be moving on to the next question. Okay. So the question that Punya just asked you, Like if it is something else, just let us know what is it in the chat window.
These are just for fun, so please do participate.
Okay, 3 of them say Pani Puri and 3 say something else. So I want to know what are those something else in the chat window. Interesting, something else 3, Pani Puri 5. So we have for Pani Puri lovers here. Yeah, even my vote goes to Pani Puri.
I guess we are going to have Pani Puri worldwide food chain soon.
Yeah, so we are going to see one Pani Puri food chain set up. Okay. I'll wait for another 20 seconds. Please vote for this. Then I'll go on to the next question. Okay, we have a shawarma. If it's the okay, Arabian chicken roll. That's an Arabian. Okay, fine. Interesting. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. So Pani Puri is the winner clearly. I think no one really wants pav bhaji and vada pav here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Guys, ma'am.
Ma'am is back. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So was the earlier session or audible?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
You
Okay.
are audible, ma'am.
Okay.
Shiva,
You take the questions.
you were asking one question, right? Please continue. Okay, ma'am. Yeah, Shiva, please.
We have a question from one of the participants.
Okay.
He says that Elon Musk said that the best team and proper vision is enough to be successful
Yes.
in a startup.
Yes.
So, is it true?
A great team and a good vision are key for a startup. Yes, they are indeed. I mean, he's a very successful entrepreneur. So I wouldn't dare to argue it. But yes, I think they are on the top of the list. A great idea and a great team are a deadly combination. But I think at the same time, they do take care of the execution. So that's most important for an idea. So that's the way to look at it. But obviously, other things that go along with it are continual innovation, which he's doing anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
So I won't argue it. Yes. So to answer your question, yes, spot on.
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, we have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when does branding really come into play? Like while establishing the startup or like for staying in the market?
As I was mentioning in the presentation, ideally you don't need to have a brand consultant, but I think it's what is important for a startup is to think branding right at the initial stage of setting up your brand identity.
Okay.
Right? Because I think that's the first step to branding. And when you're setting your brand identity, I think it's important to for the brand identity to reflect various aspects of your ideation, which is the core value, which is the purpose, the target audience, everything. So I think it's important to set your vision and mission right during the early stage, and because that becomes your brand promise actually to the customer going forward. So that's the first step, and I think branding starts then.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you have to spend a huge amount of money on branding, but I think you have to think branding at that stage.
Okay.
Branding doesn't mean spending loads of money on celebrities to advertise your product. I think there are very simple things that can be done in branding with very, very little cost, but those are the right and essential things.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, we have another question from Mohammad Abbas Adil. He asks if he's interested in starting an e-commerce business for books, for example.
Right.
And he's asking what are the things that he needs to keep in mind for the best customer service.
E-commerce for books, I think it's a space that's already challenged by many people. It's not, I wouldn't say it will be a cakewalk for him, but I think what he needs to keep in mind is to articulate why people would prefer him to, let's say, an Amazon or a Crossword or anyone else who's already selling online for a long time. So if he's able to find an answer for that, I think that will be the first step forward. Having said that, I think when I say differentiation, it's again not necessarily in that product itself. It could be, for example, if he's getting into this space where there are already players, I think he has to identify a market segment that is not already served by the bigger players, right? Then I think there is potential for him to go forward. But if he's trying to sell in a space that's already being served, it's a huge challenge. So I would probably suggest to him that he identifies a space that's not already served.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, another question, like this is like the continuation for your previous answer. You said the brand, we have to think about branding at an early stage, like think about branding, not really go for celebrities thing and costly things. So what is this question is, what would be the general problems that a young entrepreneur will face while thinking about branding or while trying to implement brand? And how can you overcome them?
I think first of all, the awareness is the challenge. So I think it's important to understand why branding is needed and how it will impact his venture going forward. So I think that's the first thing that he has to keep in mind. Having done that, either if he has resources internally to be able to handle it, he can take care of it at zero cost. Otherwise, I think he can identify people who can probably do it at very startup friendly rates, where he kind of brainstorms with them what he wants to do with his venture going forward and how he wants to position himself, and they will be able to support him or walk the journey through that and make sure that he does the first things right. Because later on, to set right something that has not been done right first time is probably more time consuming and cost consuming. So doing it right first time makes sense.
I agree, ma'am.
Ma'am, we have a question, ma'am. Like, what is the correlation between the pricing of a product and your brand image?
Good question, actually. If you are able to justify the value of your pricing, let's assume that you have a 30% premium pricing. If you are able to justify to the customer, and if the customer is able to see that he is getting value for the 30% premium pricing, then it's a brand premium pricing that he's paying. So there is a correlation. But if you are not able to show that value and you say that my price is going to be 20% more than, let's say, a competitor, he won't buy it, right? So I think the correlation between pricing and branding is the connect with the value proposition. So you can only price your product to the extent the value is seen by a customer. So it's pricing is a component of what the customer is ready to pay. Obviously, what's also what your cost is, right? But if your cost is so high that you price it at a level that a customer is not ready to pay, then obviously you're not going to survive. So I think it's the value proposition that defines the pricing and that also determines your brand positioning. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So you first of all, you need to position yourself, and then you'll be able to define what the pricing can be to an extent that the customer is ready to pay.
Ma'am, we have another question from Venkat Nivas. He's asking how the brand value can be maintained.
I think it's very similar to the question that someone asked right in the beginning about how we can maintain brand consistency.
Yes,
so it's again a combination of several things. First of all, I think the customer experience is the defining part in maintaining brand value. Right? At the end of the day, it starts and stops there. That's point number one. And point number two, you also have to make sure that you keep innovating continually. I think you have to be a step ahead of the customer to tell him what is good for him. So if we are not able to do it, somebody else will do that. So I think the close connect with the customer to understand what is good for him, and then bring about innovations that he can see value with, will ensure that the brand value is maintained. And of course, there are other things that are given, such as your quality of the product, your prompt service to the customer, and tracking his experience and managing the reputation of the brand. All of these things are very basic and given. But at a macro level, I think the important thing is to identify what the customer may want and stay a step ahead in innovation.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another question, like for a restricted cash flow startup, like where the cash is very limited. So what are few tips for branding in those cases, because they won't be able to afford any like high price?
Agree. I think there are a lot of options that are available. I mean, when you have to go to somebody for branding, I think there are many people who are startup friendly. You can work with them, but it's also not necessary that you have to be with a brand consultant. Even internally, I think you can understand what kind of guidelines need to be followed initially, and do it on your own. It's not necessary that you have to hire a brand consultant. As I mentioned earlier, I think what's important is awareness on how branding is having an impact going forward also, and to make sure that you do things right the first time. So you can actually bootstrap also for branding with internal resources.
But nowadays online like advertising is more common, right?
Yes.
So, but whatever you have to advertise, it's usually done in a few posts or
social media.
Yeah, social media. How do we grab their attention? Like it's not like a big billboard in which you can just put it in the...
True. I think that's a challenge because there are so many players vying for the same space. So there are many things that you need to do. One is, first of all, whichever channels you are going to be present, they all have to speak the same language. You have to send out a unified message. That is basic. Point number two, how do you capture the attention? Initially, obviously, you will not be able to probably not be able to afford a lot of the AI tools which can identify you who the right customers are and track them well ahead of their decision to buy your product or service. But how you can actually stand out is making your posts very, very articulate on what you're offering and how it's going to help the customer. And quality of content becomes key. So the right kind of imagery, the right kind of content, and the right keywords are important for you to grab the attention of the potential customer.
So it should be bright and catchy, whatever we are trying to do, depending on the product.
It should be appealing. I would not always say just colorful, but I think it should be appealing to the target audience. So I think you have to do a little bit of research on the target audience as well. And then you'll be able to find out what kind of, it's easy. You research competition, find out which of the competitors' posts are getting most number of likes and engagements, and then you'll be able to get a sense of what works, what may work.
Yes.
That's the easy way of, that's the, what shall I say, rather uneconomical way of doing it. But if you're going to go to an expert, obviously he's expected to know all of these and make sure that he gives you the right kind of products for branding.
Yes.
Ma'am, we got another question. So it's it refers to so many companies have made a negative reputation by their advertisements, like Zomato. So
Right.
what went wrong with their advertisings that they're damaging their own reputation?
I think there are multiple things. For example, if you take this case of Tata Nano, just as an example, very close to what you are mentioning, when they advertised the Nano, they advertised it as the cheapest car, right? So that went wrong for them. So you have to be very careful on the messaging, because everything that you say will have a repercussion. So they probably did not realize that when we call it the cheapest car, car is a status, is a signature of social status, right? And nobody would want to say that I have the cheapest car, I own the cheapest car, right? It hurts the social sentiments and standing. So like that, I think there are several cases that affect branding, but you'll also be in a position to, once you find out that you have created a damage, I think it's also important to rectify it quickly and in the right way. I think it's possible through the right messaging.
Mama, but in case of the Nano, it was losses experienced by the company that led to its shutdown rate. That was
later. But right in the beginning, I think they were not selling the cars because I think the basic brand messaging went wrong. And people were buying it more like a functional car rather than a main possession that they want to pride of.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I actually read this book, like Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So in that, it says that when you're starting a business or something, it's better if you fail as early as possible. So
that's a good one. Yeah, I think, see, entrepreneur journey is like a battlefield, right? Unless you make your first step, you don't know what is in store. And you don't know what challenges come your way. You don't know what opportunities come your way. So I think it is very important to make that first step. As I mentioned earlier, you have to overestimate failure, right? And if you do that, you're not going to get caught down when it happens, and you're ready to try out another venture because you're hungry for it and you'll go for it anyway. And if you fail, fine, there's nothing wrong. go for it. I mean, you have learned many things all along the way. So your next venture is bound to be a lot more successful. So that's absolutely right. I mean, you don't have to fail, but if you fail, you don't have to get distressed.
Yes.
You don't have to get into a venture saying that I want to fail, right? You don't want to do that. You get into a venture with a positive spirit, but if for some reason if it does fail, so be it. Don't allow that to daunt you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dauntless enterprising.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, now Venkat will be continuing with the session, ma'am.
Sure. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I, on behalf of ENSL and the entire team, thank everyone for supporting us directly or indirectly. Let me call this a fraternity of budding entrepreneurs here together. And on behalf of ENSL, I would like to thank our chief guest and speaker, Sri Asha Sampath, for gracing our event with her presence, for enlightening us with her valuable findings, erudition, and knowledge. We are really glad to interact with you, ma'am, today. We thank to our director, Mr. CSP Rao sir, for encouraging and supporting us in the establishment of the cell. I thank Viraj sir and the Dean of Student Affairs for organizing this event. I thank Dr. Soumya Josh, HOD, School of Humanities and Management. And I also thank Dr. Premlata Madam for constant support and guidance. We could not have been able to do this without you, ma'am. It was a worth tuning into. It was useful and worth listening to you, ma'am. I hope everyone here has noted the key points. We gained a lot of knowledge today, which will be useful for us in our entrepreneurial journey. I think everyone has some great takeaways from this particular event. I can't thank each and everyone enough for their involvement in and their willingness to take on the completion of the task beyond their comfort zones. Thank you so much. And for further updates, please connect us on Telegram and also follow us on Instagram. And guys, the participants, I would please request you to fill the feedback form. And once again, I thank each and everyone for joining us today. And thank you, ma'am, once again for your support.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Premlata, Venkat, and the entire team for this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and congratulations once again for this initiative that you all have taken. And I wish many entrepreneurs flourish from the E&I cell of NIT Andhra Pradesh. I would like to wish them all the best.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, ma'am.
All the participants are hereby requested to leave the session. And once again, thank you.
Just drop the link of feedback form in the... Okay, it's done. Okay, fine.
Guys, if you have filled the feedback form, please feel free to leave the session. Okay, guys, it's only as now.